Lisa Steele, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming and doing this. I know you've got an extremely busy schedule. I'm just going to introduce you for our guest quickly. You're a naturopathic doctor, clinical director of the Optimal Health Group. You are an optimal health visionary, Lisa, and one of the UK's leading naturopathic doctors who has been in practice for over 30 years. And you're responsible for setting the direction and principles of the Optimal Health Group and inspiring the team. You're passionate about guiding and educating patients on complex health issues and optimizing health naturally, educating patients to be able to take responsibility for their own health and well-being using non-invasive, natural, and supportive means in your mission.
Yeah.
Does that sum things up for you?
Yes, very much so. Very much so. I'm very keen on looking at health from a bigger perspective. And I think what you're talking about there is just holding a vision that is very clear and then walking the talk and helping people to travel with us and see what the opportunities are.
I mean, it's just so topical nowadays with, there's a lot of talk about people pulling traditional pharmaceutical Western medicine into question. And there's a lot of advocacy for more holistic, natural remedies. And I've been a client of yours at Optimal Health Group and a very happy customer. I tried lots of things and that didn't work. I was struggling from brain fog and lethargy and stomach problems, but you were sort of my last resort, so to speak. And I was recommended by a friend, and I couldn't speak more highly of the experience. So I was really keen to get you on because it was very different, and there were things that I hadn't thought about or known about, and technologies and ways of looking at things. So that's why I was really keen to get you on. But before we sort of go back and dig into your origin story and how you came about to be where you are today, give me the high level of what is the Optimal Health Group and what do you do there and what's going on there today?
Okay, so you referred to a couple of words in that introduction. So holistic. So what we do is we take a holistic view. And with all these words, they have lots of connotations. But in my world, that means looking at the whole body, which is the whole mind, the whole body, and the whole spirit, and looking at why that body is going through a level of discomfort, whatever that discomfort is. And if we're able to identify the why, it gives us enormous opportunity to support that patient to find their way through, because ultimately the patient heals him or herself. We are, as doctors, we are teachers, and we are acting as a catalyst to enable people to heal themselves. That is our role.
Okay. And then, so what kind of people tend to get in touch with you? What kind of problems are you typically solving?
We don't focus on the title of what they think is going on. Every single patient that walks through the door, we are assessing to look at what is it and where were they, at what point on their path did they suddenly come to the conclusion that something wasn't quite right. And often it takes the first 30 seconds to ask that question, and we can see where that's come from. And in most cases, it's come in from the psyche, from an emotional stress. They may not know that, but that is usually the original point, and it is usually the end point. It starts in the psyche, and it goes back to the psyche.
Got it. And so I'm guessing, a real part of the philosophy of it all is not treating things with chemicals and really going to the root of the problem and try to heal from within rather than just mask the ailment, so to speak.
Yes. So again, the way we work is that we're looking always for the causative. It's good to see the symptoms and to hear the patient articulate the symptoms, but the symptoms aren't the root.
Mm.
And symptoms move. Yeah, they move through the body, and one day it might be this and another day it might be this. So the symptoms is not where you focus your attention. You're looking at what is the underlying malaise. Where did it come from? When did it start? Why did it start? And once you get an idea of that baseline, we have everywhere to go with it, everywhere. I always say it's a bit like an owl. Owls have this 360 vision on life. And if you can open that up and go away from just symptom management, which is the conventional model, you have every opportunity to support self-healing for that patient.
It's super interesting, and we're gonna come back to that, and I want to know a lot more about what you're doing at the clinics. But let's just rewind for a second, because I want to know, how did you get into all of this in the first place? What's your story?
So I think how it all started for me really was I had planned to go to Cambridge University when I was 16. And unfortunately, my father was diagnosed with, first of all, pneumonia, and then multiple myeloma, which is a cancer of the white blood cells. And this was a 56-year-old, strong, superbly athletic man with no overt symptoms that anyone could really see. And he went from that diagnosis in the September time to dying 6 months later in the April of this condition. And I spent that 6 months in hospital with him every night, going in and questioning why and how and what could be done and how could we help him to help himself. And there was nothing. I mean, again, this is early 80s, so it's a long time ago. But what really struck me was the ultimate disempowerment of my father. He went from this strong person to not able to function through this disease, but none of us could help him. We had nowhere to go. And I think that for me was a massive point where I realized that there was something going on that was way beyond what anyone was able to do for him. And the feedback was in the hospital. The nurses were fabulous, the doctors were fabulous. They couldn't be nicer people, but they had no skills, they had no tools. And that for me was a massive
sort of helplessness
awakening.
about the whole situation.
And the vulnerability. You realize we didn't know what to do. And so, the consequence of that meant that I didn't go to Cambridge, that my family fell apart, that I ended up doing a completely different trajectory to where I had intended. And it took me a while to recover. But I think when it's in you, and I said to him on his deathbed, I said, I'm going to find out why and what could have been done. And that is what I've been able to do as we've come full circle. So it took me really until my mid-20s to understand that I could help him. I could look at a different way. And that's when I completely, fully retrained in this world.
So you started going down the rabbit hole of medicine, and you started off down a traditional path, and then you pivoted to looking for answers.
Just
tell me a bit more about that.
Well, for me, it was a hard line. There were, whilst it's interesting to learn about the body and these diseases, there were no solutions that I could see that were fundamentally reversing these disease states. There was nowhere to go. And so it was a friend of mine who said to me, why don't you go and study acupuncture? Because it gives you this holistic view and it gives you options and it's all about energy. And I was thinking, well, I don't like needles, so probably that wouldn't be for me. But that was the real pivot point to say, okay, so what is there out there?
But what was the resistance against the traditional medicine Like, what was the point where you're like, no, is it because you realized that it wasn't going to the
Symptom
root
management.
of it's symptom
It's
management?
symptom
Yeah.
management. My father presented with a series of symptoms, and the management of that was to suppress the symptoms, to give him comfort. If he's in pain, they gave him pain relief. But there was no one was trying to get underneath why that had happened.
What's actually causing this?
What actually causing it, yeah.
So then what happened?
So then I retrained. Yeah, so
you didn't do the acupuncture, but
No, I went back through. So I started in clinical nutrition and trained as a clinical nutritionist, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough for me. And so that's when I embarked upon the naturopathic course.
And what is that?
Well, it's a branch of medicine. Yeah. So naturopathic medicine is not something that's just open toe sandaled or just some. I don't know I think people just don't understand what it is.
Yeah.
But you follow the baselines of medicine. You learn what anatomy, you learn physiology, you learn biochemistry, you learn pathology. But where you divert is that when you actually come to work with the patients, instead of managing that treatment pathway with a series of drugs, suppressing symptoms, you have a whole wealth of treatments that you can offer. And as I got into it, what I realized was that the solutions lie in the energy field. Matter is not matter. Matter is energy. And all we are bundles of energy, which gets diverted. And so once I got that conceptually at the physics level, everything changed. Which is why, as I've gone through the years, I've moved from a more hands-on nature cure type of approach, which was served itself in the early days.
Nature, trying to use nature,
yes, using
things like acupuncture or one's environment, or
it's
homeopathic remedies.
Well, nature. So the things that help us to stay within our resonance and in our energy, within our health: sunshine, lights, water, breathing, nutrition, exercise. So just for starters.
And then going one level deeper, like natural remedies as well.
And then if you're needing to have supportive agents, rather than having something that is very linear and blocks something, you might choose a herb which is much more adaptogenic. Or you use an energetic approach like homeopathy, which treats like with like. So you're treating the agent and enabling the energy to shift so that your body comes back into self-healing.
So then you kept going.
Yeah.
What was the next step? That wasn't enough. You were still curious, and what was the next stage?
Well, I think the next stage really is a sign of the times. We shifted from having to call somebody on a landline to a mobile phone. We started to use computers in practice, and that was just a sign of the types of technology which were starting to come into medicine. And so very, very quickly, I've moved from hand to technology. And some of the technology that's out there, which is all
healing technology.
Yeah, it's focused around energy, shifting energy. So those are the kind of things that we now come full circle, use in practice. And every year there are some amazing new types of technology being brought out, which are phenomenal.
So you started investigating that technology because you could see the benefits. Can you link for me, that part of your life, and then connecting with the Optimal Health Group and what they were doing, and how did you become where you are now in the UK with the company?
Yeah, through a guy called John, who I trained with as a naturopathic doctor. We trained together. He was a physicist, he was a chemist, And he said to me right at the beginning, Lisa, unless you move into technology, you won't have a practice in a few years' time. And I, being me and being resistant to that, I was like, I've got kids, I've got too much going on, I have no bandwidth for that. But slowly, he pulled me across the coals and introduced me to some very basic technology, which I started to adopt and use in practice and see the benefits
What
of.
was? Can you give an example of those early,
Well, the
simple
first things
technologies?
that I brought in was the basic bioresonance system, which is called a SCIO system that some of your viewers may well be familiar with. And it's basically using the frequencies of the terrain, so your terrain, and then you are getting feedback from those frequencies. And where they don't sit in harmony, you are using frequencies to adapt and support that change back into harmonization where the frequencies are running normally. Because in wellness, you need to be in flow and you need to be in a rotational field. And in sickness, you get stuck. Yeah, you get into this linear frequency where you cannot get out of it. So bioresonance, which is now, I mean, there are many devices out there, but bioresonance is incredible where it's gone.
So does that identify what the problem is and why, and it helps solve it as well?
Yeah, so
or
it
you
is that.
administer with something else.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword. It has the diagnostic capacity to assess the field, to know whether something is in a rotational space and is doing well, and the body will self-heal, or whether there's something that is stuck, an energy system that is stuck, which will then create symptoms, physical symptoms, that are uncomfortable for us.
Can you just give an example of a type of symptom and that machine has been used for in the past? Just so people can relate.
Yeah, well, you could say headaches. Yeah. So the root cause of a headache could be all manner of things. And in the conventional model, we take a drug and we stop the headache, which is fantastic. If you've got a headache and you need to perform, you can take a pill and it will stop you having a headache so you can continue to perform. And that's fantastic. But if you're having a headache every day and other associated symptoms, for me, you would want to know why. Why do I persistently get that headache? And so if you're looking at a bioresonance assessment, it will give you a plethora of options to look at as to why you have a headache. It could be because there is emotional stress. You've just had an argument with somebody. It's stressful. So the body might well experience a headache. You could have issues in your digestive system, inflammation. Inflammation is likely to cause stasis in the bowel. So you might get a constipated pattern in the bowel, which then will give you a headache. You might have, as a woman, you might have a menstrual cycle that is not flowing. Yeah, it's not flowing. You're getting clotting, you're getting pain, you're getting cramping. So that may well come along with a headache because you've got congestion. So a bioresonance, as with our training in assessing this, can interpret why the headache's there.
So it can pick
where
that up.
It's coming
it can pick
from.
it up in the body.
Absolutely. And then you have many options to deal with that.
Was that one of the machines that I did in the initial assessment where I put my hands on which machine was that?
So there is the difference between our diagnostic assessments and then our treatments. So in order to get to the treatments, you would need to see what's going on.
Okay.
But going back to the bioresonance, it has both aspects.
It can do both.
Yeah.
Got it.
But because people feel less comfortable probably with starting there because it feels a bit out there and maybe they don't understand that we are just energy. So walking into something where there's a machine might not be adequate. We do a step before, which picks up more of the conventional model. So we can look at what's happening in the cells systemically, and then we can pinpoint, okay, there is constipation. So now we're going to look at some support for relief for the symptoms whilst we fix the etiology, while we fix the cause of that.
Because I remember, and it was definitely a wow moment where you hooked me up to this machine, and it was essentially scanning my body, and then you pulled up the screen, and you were basically assessing different organs in my body. And I was like, how the hell can this machine, how does it know that? Where did you get this technology, and why isn't it in the NHS, for example? So what was that machine, that diagnostic machine that you tend to screen with most of your
so
your
that's
patients?
our optimal health assessment, and that is an electrical interstitial assessment. So in the body, there are many fluids, and in the conventional model, people tend to use the blood test as the baseline. But blood is only a ninth of all the fluids in the body, because we have interstitial and extrastitial secretions going on in the body, and that makes up the bulk of the fluids. And so what this system does is it scans the interstitial environment. So what the cells are doing. If the cells are absorbing, if the cells are firing at the right gradient to be able to create metabolism. So that very subtle layer that's missed if you just take a blood sample. It's not that we don't use blood. We can use blood as well to compare and contrast. So you've got a differential diagnosis going on. You can look what the cells say. You can look what the blood says. You can look what the saliva says. You can look what the stool says. All of these options are available. But that real dive into an overview of the whole of you, as we did, was enabled me to see that the focus for you was your digestive system.
It pinpointed that.
Pinpointed it. It showed the inflammation. So we had a starting point to know where to go.
And then, so once in that diagnostic phase, when you're looking at the cellular level, which I think is the most fascinating part, doesn't get much more like cause effect than that. What types of treatments do you then use to heal at the cellular level once you've identified what's going on?
Yes. So again, we're always looking for causals. And so we will probably take people through their emotional assessment to see what triggered it in the first place. And in that case, we would use our optimal sound therapy, which identifies causal factors. And then, depending on what we find, everything that we do at the treatment level involves frequency. So we're using either a device to support an increase in the gradient across the cells. So we have PEMF devices.
What's that?
They're electromagnetic devices which basically enable that shift of the sodium-potassium pump. So they change the ions in the cells so that they are normalized. And in that normalization, the body will heal. So people present with either low function or hyperfunction. And the solution is to get them back into homeostasis.
Got it.
So whatever device we have is dictated by the patient, what the patient can cope with in terms of their understanding and their happiness to do that treatment, because you don't have to do the same thing to achieve the same result. But also, to a certain degree, it will depend on how chronic their problem has been, because obviously it will take longer for people who have been in that space for a little longer.
And where does the Optimal Health Clinic get all this technology and find all this technology? I mean, I remember asking you about the diagnostic stuff, where does that come from? And you were telling me about it's been the Russians used to use it in the war or something like that. What, remind me?
Yes. So, part of our diagnostic kits comes out of the States.
Okay.
It is bespokely produced. Part of it comes out of Russia. And our other devices, we've got our sound therapy comes out of Holland. So it's basically, they are international areas. Wherever the discipline of expertise is, we have access to that.
But is this stuff that's been around for a while, or it's new cutting edge stuff?
The technology has been around forever.
That seems crazy.
The gadgets, are obviously improving every year. But yeah, it's been around. I mean, the concepts go back 100 years. So there's nothing new in it. But as we've moved from the hard block of the mobile phone to this, to this, to this, everything's just become a lot more efficient and more modernized and more accessible.
Am I right in saying that the majority of people that come and knock on your door are the people that have just had chronic issues, that they've tried their GP, they've tried this, they've tried that, and they can't get themselves right?
Yeah.
Does that tend to be what happens?
Absolutely. I mean, that is really the core of what we do. I think because we have a holistic view, we're able to have that helicopter view to see. We then have these amazing bits of diagnostic kit which enable us to pinpoint the cause. And then from there, with the patient's commitment, because we're not doing it, the patient does the work, it will then depend on how able the patient is to free that space to take on the information that the technology has provided. And then the self-healing begins. And then they can maintain that by staying aware and clearing out any negativity that sits in conditions of disease that they've adopted. If someone tells you you've got a condition, you adopt that condition, and that becomes a negative state. And if you stay in that negative state, it will persist. So it's trying to help them get out of that negative state to understand that everything is repairable.
And just talk to me about what you mean by this terminology, dis-ease, because I looked it on your website, and that that's something that you speak about, and I think that kind of sums up what you're talking about just there, doesn't it?
Yeah. So again, the body is designed to heal itself. So that is a body that is well will continue to be well. But when the body, and it's usually from exogenous sources, so external sources that impact us, becomes intoxicated by that, your body struggles to maintain that balance. That is the thing that knocks us into a state of dis-ease. Yeah. So we have an ease when we're well, and everything flows, and we feel great.
The
and
immune
we've got
system's
loads of
working
energy,
well. Yeah.
and we look fantastic. Our hair and our skin, and everything works. But when you get that assault, whether it's an emotional trauma or a physical impact, an accident, or a toxicity that infiltrates the system, disrupts the energy, then symptoms will present.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And I'm guessing by just the nature of what you do, you must get some cancer patients looking to try and heal holistically, and traditional medicine's not working. Is that right?
We get patients who are stuck all the time. They're stuck, they're toxic, they're congested, and they don't know where to go. So again, we don't treat the disease. We treat the person.
Yeah, you're even looking past that right
way
now.
Way beyond it, all the time. I look at that patient, I think, what is it? Where is the lack? To be able to find it, to find that healing energy. Where is the lack? And once you can see that, and working with that, you see it, you have everywhere to go. Everywhere to go. Which is why I do what I do, Charlie.
Yeah, you're incredibly
I'm passionate about it.
No, I could feel that from the moment I met you. And again, the nature of it, it's not a quick fix. It's not putting the Band-Aid on the symptom. It is a holistic, healing, regenerative process. So talk to me about that sort of time frame, and that one does need a degree of patience with the process.
So again, it's all about setting expectations. So I have a headache, Charlie, and I come to you as my GP and I say to you, I don't want this headache, but I don't want to do any work because I have to perform every day. I have to fly around the world. So please help me. And 9 times out of 10, the solution will be offered there. But these days, there is a much greater awareness of how involved we can become in our health. Yeah, would you agree? That's what people understand that so much more. So when you've made that decision that actually you want to take a deeper dive, I really want to understand why I'm having a cyclical headache. You have to know that if it's taken you 20 years to come to that conclusion that you've now got to make the effort, it's probably going to take you at least 20 months to unravel it.
And it's that appreciation of people, isn't it? And I suppose there has to be that desire to wanna, classic. When I came to see you and you helped me, and I tried a lot of other things and you helped me, I was going around saying, hey, guys, girls, you've all got to go and see Lisa. But then you can't push people to do things. Everyone has their own thing. And some people maybe don't care. They're not fussed about the headache. They just pop a paracetamol, and they're not fussed about that they've got bloating or lethargy or whatever it is, right? And that's fine. But I think, to your point, it's when people are getting fed up and they do want to, they can't just keep on, they keep getting tonsillitis or they keep getting this or whatever it is, and they actually want to, for once and for all, try and sort it out from the inside out. Yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. We all come to that tipping point. Yeah? Some people do it very early on in their teens, in their 20s. They get it, they see it, and they want to do it. For others, it can take till their 70s. I've just literally come from the clinic this morning treating a 92-year-old lady.
Wow.
Beautiful, beautiful. And it's taken her because she's been so well all her life. And now something's tripped. And she's like, why? Why? And what's so amazing about her is that the age has not even occurred to her. It's not even an age thing. She has felt well and now she doesn't. Lisa, what can I do? She said, I might only have a couple of years left, but I want my vitality. I want it back. Fantastic. So I've got everything to work with because mentally she's up for it.
So how do you bring back that vitality and looking at the cellular level and help people bring back, whether it's the minerals or the balances or the energy and, all the stuff that you...
For her, I start with the psyche because what's happened is her emotional state has dropped. She's been happy and well. And when you investigate that, I can completely understand why she's suddenly not feeling well because an emotional thing has happened to her. And so her energy has dropped and eventually everything will start to feel a bit more achy breaky. So we start by supporting that field, supporting her psyche. And then inevitably at 92, things don't work as well as they could do. But, I'm encouraging her to get hydrogen at home that she can use every day. I'm encouraging her to get an infrared sauna that she uses appropriately because she has to be very careful because it can be very powerful. I've revamped her diet. I've asked her to drink water. She hasn't been drinking water. Really, really basic principles, which...
Going sort of using nature, going back to those roots.
And breathing and doing some yogic positions every day. If she does those 5 things, she may well feel well enough.
Yeah, it's bringing the body back into that
homeostasis.
Homeostasis. My mother was actually great friends with a leading cancer prevention specialist called Dr. Jan de Winter, who was quite prolific in the 70s and 80s, and he created one of the first walk-in cancer prevention clinics down in Brighton. And I was lucky enough to meet him once, and he wrote a book called How to Die Young at 90. And it was a small little book. And I always remember reading it. It's got sort of pictures and things and all the obvious stuff like don't smoke and diet, whatever. But there was this one page on emotional stress. And it's sort of, I mean, I was only like a teenager at the time, but I always remember that because it wasn't something that I was familiar with at the time. And it all, it always sort of stuck with me. And there were these sort of list of questions around understanding oneself and, whether you have emotional stress and you're holding that in your body. But just that connection that I suppose we're all becoming more aware of nowadays. But if someone does hold that emotional stress in their body, which, I've heard from a bunch of sources, people, professionals, that can be one of the most harmful things to our health. We can do everything right, but still have that emotional stress, and that
Definitely.
impacts, that's depleting our vitality and our energy. So things like digestive system, immune system misses out. But if you've got someone that comes to you and you're identifying that a lot of these problems are coming from that emotional stress, what do you prescribe them?
So you're right that, as I said at the beginning, the psyche plays a massive part in the etiology of disease. That means that there are centers in the body which are carrying emotions that have not been processed. That lack of processing means they get stuck. Yeah, a linear pattern develops. So there are many ways that one could go about that. We have people who are trained to use talking therapy. Some people like to do that. We have people who are trained in the emotion code. Some people like to use that.
What's the emotion code?
It's just a means of clearing blockages from the system.
Is it like talk therapy or?
It's like talk therapy.
Okay.
Yes, you can use devices to clear the energy, but yes, it's like talking therapy.
Okay, but it's a technology.
Yeah, it's a technique.
It's a technique. Got it.
It's a technique.
Okay.
But if you want to use a technology, we have our optimal sound therapy. So what happens there is that we identify what the emotions are by recording your voice. Voice has its unique sounds and notes, and those notes are attached to a frequency. The frequency is emotional and physical. And the translation of that sound therapy means that we immediately, within 10 minutes, have a snapshot of the emotional and the physical picture of that patient, as well as their stress system, their immune system, and their traumas that they have lodged in their systems. So that assessment immediately tells you everything. And then the treatment is that we produce sound files, which again are balancing files at a certain level, which we make a number of them depending on how many interferences there are that we pick up. We put them together, and then the patient, as a treatment, listens to them. That is it. They listen to them in the morning and they listen to them in the evening, and the brain picks up the normalized frequencies for that center of physicality or emotionality or trauma and restores it.
Wow, that's amazing. Is that anything to do with, in meditation when people get given a mantra and use for example, Om a lot out loud? It's because those sound frequencies are meant to resonate with, I can't remember what it's called, but do what you're sort of talking about and try and sort of rebalance the
same principle.
Same principle.
But the difference is that was what one did before technology came.
It's now
technology
accelerating.
Oh my gosh, what would have taken you 2 years with a talking therapist to even identify that there was a trauma that you had at the age of 3 when you couldn't even remember it, you see it instantaneously. And you can see the trauma in the voice note, and then you can use the file to clear the trauma through that mechanism. And you're involved in it, but your involvement isn't having to tell everybody everything that's gone and relive the trauma. Your involvement is a commitment to listening to the balanced files. And we can check, that you can do it, that you're doing it. We can see you when you're doing it, but then we can compare and contrast, and you see the shift. It's incredible.
Amazing.
And you see when the traumas leave.
How can you see that?
By repeating the assessment, by listening and by talking again into the microphone and picking up the new resonance, you can see where it clears.
Wow.
Incredible. I mean, for me, that is probably the most profound thing that we do.
Wow. I mean, it's a great example of alternatives to, years of maybe talk therapy that can work for some people, but not for others. And
Yeah.
that kind of thing. So
but
what
everybody could benefit from
everyone
that.
could benefit.
Everybody.
Yeah.
And ongoing. Because life changes, doesn't it?
People go through things. They hold on to things.
Yeah.
Something that idea that someone can do something to someone and that person disappears, but the person is left with that, thought or emotion that keeps them coming back and they can't get rid of it.
Yeah.
So talk to me about some of the results you're getting. I mean, is it a question of, your patients invest with you and are committed and, they want to get to the bottom of it all, and some people get healed, some people don't, it's a bit hit and miss, how kind of certain are the results? Does it all work?
So I think, going back to the premise, people heal themselves. So the efficacy of what we do is dependent on the education of the patient. Full stop. So if the patient learns through the experience and uses the tools that are available, the body will shift. And there are people who come in for single things. I have this problem, and they fix it. And what we try to do is put them on a path of self-care so that they continue to check in on their self-care. And if they get disrupted again because life gets in the way, they have the opportunity to check back in and just see where they are. So there's that pathway. But there are other people who are unable to get enough capacity to clear very quickly. And it generally is because they're stuck in their emotional trauma.
That's one of the hardest things to get through.
That is the hardest thing to shift.
Interesting.
Yeah. Because once you shift that, the rest of the things that are happening are moving all the time. You have adaptation, but it's the brain that stops you from accepting or letting go of something.
And what does that even look like at the clinic? Because let's say you identify in me that some of my physical ailments are to do with emotional stress that are linked to emotional trauma or whatever. And then you kind of need me to buy into that to kind of like go away and do all the holistic things, whether it's coming to the clinic for some sessions on the technology, or whether it's the supplements, or whether it's the diet, or whether it's the meditation or whatever. How do you, if I'm quite resistant and I'm like, what do you mean trauma? That's ridiculous. Do you have an in-house psychologist, or is part of it like having those conversations? And, what if I'm like, I don't buy in, or, I'm very closed about me having any psychological trauma? Like how does one approach that inside the clinic if that's one of the major hurdles to get the buy-in?
Well, I think again we try to meet the patient where they are, and some people are very novice in this area, so you can only take baby steps. You can't get to the trauma immediately. You have to, there's a trust that has to happen. There's a kindness that has to happen, and a love. We sit and we work to find that common space. And then slowly, spaces where there's dogmatism, I refuse to give up gluten, let's say, becomes, I'm not so bothered about that now, because I can see actually, you've only asked me to do two things. One is just not to have gluten. And the other one is to go and breathe every day. Yeah, practice some breath work. And I can see by just doing those two things that my head is starting to change. And so you keep meeting them where they're able to move. And it can take forever. But patience is what we're about. Yeah, about waiting for that to happen. But you inevitably get people who will naturally just block the whole thing. And if that's what happens, then they're not ready for the experience that we're able to offer them. And I think that's where both of us have to be in a position where we can say, this is not right for you now, but it might be right for you in the future. People have options. That is one of my main drivers, that we all have a freedom of choice available to us.
So one of my most memorable things that I did with you guys was the Heidelberg test, which was interesting to say the least. It was a sensor that was the size of a pill, just for the listeners to picture it, that was attached to a very thin piece of string almost.
Yeah. Well, thread. String implies thick.
Yeah.
So
no, that was the word.
Yeah.
It was a very thin piece of thread.
Yeah.
So you swallow the sensor, the size of the capsule, and it sits just in your stomach, in the upper stomach, and then one's given some different things to ingest. I can't remember what it was.
You're given some agents to challenge, aren't you? Some buffering agents. So you'll challenge it with an alkaline substance.
That's right. And it was basically that the sensor real time on the computer screen is picking up how your stomach is reacting to certain things.
Yeah.
And I mean, that was quite a thing, particularly when you're trying to take it out at the end and having something in your stomach attached to a thread. But taking that aside, that was a game changer, because that was so specific in telling us what the issue was, that, I wasn't producing enough X and Y. So we could help overcome that by having supplements, etc. I'd spent years of guesswork trying to figure out what was going on in my stomach, and, like not eating this and trying that diet, but actually doing that, going straight into finding out what was going on, was revelationary for me. And so I suppose my question is, like, why don't more people do the Heidelberg test? Like, why is it such a niche thing?
Okay, so the tenet behind what you're explaining is a real basic tenet of health. If you don't have an acid-base balance in your digestive system, then you won't be able to metabolize your fuel properly, which leads to inflammation, toxicity, loss of rotational energy, and symptoms. So it's such a crucial part of your digestive physiology. And in the conventional model, we have some amazing bits of kit. We have gastroscopies, we have endoscopies, we have MRIs, we have ultrasounds, we have x-rays, we have all these things that can look at anatomically what's going on. But we have a dearth of things to identify function. And the thing
it's
about
the function
the Heidelberg
that it identifies,
is that it determines the function of your acid-base balance. So not only...
It watched it happen in real time.
And you can see it happening. So not only can you see the pH and how it changes as you challenge it, but you can also see the efficacy of the sphincters around that area, which are meant to be able to push the food through appropriately. And you can also see if there is a hiatus hernia developing, if there is gastritis, if there is ulceration. You can see those things at the functional level. So coming into the treatments, you can see it, and the fix on the digestive system has to start with the esophageal function and the pH balance to process the food you're putting in. So if you can support that and enable that without putting in PPIs to suppress acid, which is what most people are given to suppress it, because a lot of the issues come from no stomach acid or low stomach acid. And you're putting a suppressive agent in, which means there's no function in your stomach. So once you can get the stomach working with some even basic dietary advice, you'll start to process it, and your body will then love it and metabolize and produce the energy that's needed to repair you, and then for all your functions to happen nutritionally.
And so why isn't something like this used more widely?
Well, what's interesting about the Heidelberg thing is that in every hospital there's a Heidelberg machine.
Really?
Yeah, because they base a lot of their research on the findings of the Heidelberg, but they don't use it for patient care. And I would say that is through lack of understanding of the whole person, how important it is, absolute lack of training in nutrition at the GP level. It's very, very weak. So what are you going to tell patients? And also because it takes enormous time to coach somebody into a different diet and lifestyle. And that's just not available in the system. So for all those reasons, it's much more efficient for them to diagnose an issue through endoscopy or gastroscopy and then use drugs or surgery to try to change that an anatomical issue.
And I'm guessing it's same for, some of those other more general diagnostic technologies that you were talking about at the beginning, that you do for the assessment, and you plug the patient in and you scan the body and you can see what's going on at the cellular level. And a lot of it's even for prevention as well.
Yeah.
I'm guessing like if the NHS adopted some of those machines, like it would have incredible benefits and save lots of money across the board, because they're seeing what's really going on and they're treating the cause, not the effect.
Yeah.
Why is it not? It's not happening for the same reasons you just mentioned.
It's the same reasons. I mean, a lot of the treatments that we use are already in the system. If you think about it, thermography's in the main system, hydrogen therapy's in the main system, hyperbaric oxygen's in the main system, infrared is in the same system. So these are not revolutionary technologies that the medical system aren't aware of. They're using them. But because the education for the GP is around symptoms, identifying symptoms, looking at the symptoms on a list and saying this patient must have this disease, so we're going to give them this pharmacology, there's nowhere to go. So for me, the only way that will change is if the education of the doctors changes to focus on root causes, focus on the things that we bring into the world, which are all free to us, teaching people how important breathing is for oxygen carbon dioxide exchange. Massive thing. Teaching people how important the acid-base balance is. These are just fundamentals that are just skipped. They're taught. It's not that they're not taught, but they're not taught holistically.
What advice would you give people when they're trying to communicate maybe some of their own opinions or what they've read, or even listening to this podcast to their GP or, their traditional healthcare provider? Because it's something I certainly struggled with. I'm kind of drinking the Kool-Aid, seeing things working. And, I even remember like having the diagnosis from you and then speaking to my GP about something else. And I was like, look, what do you think about this? The test showed this in my stomach. What would you do? I kind of just wanted to check it out and do my research. And I got some spiel about, taking some pills to counteract what was going on. But I'm like, yeah, but hang on a second. Like, is that going to solve the problem? And, what's causing it? And it was just sort of going round and round in circles. And I suppose what I'm getting at is that there's obviously a place for traditional medicine and hospitals, whatever. But, it's really hard for people to be like, oh, I'm reading this book, I'm listening to this alternative stuff. And then they go and speak to their GP. And it's really hard to kind of like disagree with the authority, the NHS, the doctor. I'm just some, mere mortal, what do I know? And so it's quite hard to, I suppose, know how far to go, or how much to push back and disagree with them and try something else. It's there's so much specific knowledge required in healthcare. It's like, do we all of a sudden have to become experts ourselves and research and figure out what's best? I mean, what would be your advice?
Well, I would say, if you want a painter, you wouldn't go to a plumber for advice. Yeah. So just because the GP operates in the world of medicine, their training is such that you're going to get this response. Like if you came to me, you're going to get this response. So what I would love for people to have at their fingertips is that ability to decide what they want out of the meeting with the GP or with the naturopath. What is it the outcome that you want? Because if you want to look at preventative medicine, if you want to look at looking after yourself more, you are not going to get the answers from the GP. The GP works within very tight constraints. They are not going to be able, even if they are open to it, and many are, they are not going to be able within their system to suggest that someone comes to see a me. It's just not a thing. So I think it's you have to set your expectation. You have to be realistic about what you're asking your doctor.
And who you're talking
to. And I think I have a great compassion for GPs, especially in these times where they are intelligent, they've done so much work. It's really hard getting to the top of your game, but their tools are limited, really limited. And they have 5-10 minutes with a patient to try to get on top of long-term chronic issues. I mean, it's at best, it's stressful.
And how much of it is, we're going to go a bit controversial now, how much of it is this whole sort of corporate big pharma, not wanting to adopt some of these more preventative technologies because, that's not good for the bottom line?
I'm sure every business is marketing led. It's a great business being in healthcare or disease management. It's a great business. It never goes away. So if I was marketing a drug, I'd do exactly what is happening because it makes money. And I'm sure there's compassion around the edges of that. But it's not a world that I want to be involved in because my interest is actually supporting people to be educated sufficiently that they can look after themselves. So it's hard, isn't it? It's a business. So I understand why it goes on. But if I wasn't very well, I wouldn't look to a doctor to make me feel better. It just wouldn't be what I would do. I would seek out advice that would enable me to learn more about myself, to know what I would need to do to get myself back into wellness.
Talk to me a bit about what's happening at the Optimal Health Group today. You've got your new practice in, you were in Winchester, now you've got your fancy new clinic in Hampshire.
Yep.
Tell me a bit more about the expansion plans. You mentioned something just before we were having a chat up north in London.
So what's happening at the moment for us is we've just moved from a smaller clinic in Winchester, near Winchester, into a much larger premise in Hampshire, north of Winchester. We have 18 rooms there. We will be moving in a conventional practice, but a holistic conventional practice into our space, because my aim is that, we have a vision for integrated medicine. So it's really important that we can offer our patients allopathic support as well as holistic support.
Allopathic
being mainstream medicine.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. So we are gearing up to do that. We are working alongside a holistic dentist who will also be joining us in the near future so that we can offer a holistic view of dental care as well. We have a small space in London at the moment on the premise that we will look for a bigger operation in due course. And we are working on opening up new premises in the Lancashire area, which is super exciting.
Yeah, you were telling me you've got,
Yeah.
I think, 300 potential clients up there who are just, look,
big
so
waiting list.
there's a big waiting list. And tell me a bit more about that, because that you're going to be doing retreats up there as well.
We will be planning to offer the assessments and the treatments that we have in the south, but there are other opportunities. So we're going to be focusing on dementia care, and we will be possibly looking at incorporating retreats so that people can go and spend 1 to 2 weeks engaging in specific programs, whether that's a detoxification program for the mind or for the body, or just general, being able to go through their treatment pathways guided without the chatter of daily life, which is, a big thing. And then the other thing that I'm focusing on is the educational side. So I'm putting together a degree course to train people in integrated medicine. Again, there will be dentistry in there, so people have options to do that. But the only way that we are going to change and allow opportunity for people to work in this holistic space is to train as many people in that space that want to be
your
trained.
point earlier, why more people aren't adopting the philosophies. Will that be an online university or an existing university will adopt that degree and have it as a...
Well, it will be independent in the short term. It will have a combination. So we will definitely have online modules because all the baseline needs to be taught. But then as you go through the years, there has to be practical involvement in clinic.
So it can be incorporated. So
you'll be in clinic and you'll be learning the technology, how it's applied, where it's not appropriate. And then there will be the opportunity to do research. And then we will be training people to be able to set up their own clinics.
Wow. I mean, that sounds amazing. I didn't know about that. That sounds amazing. I mean, I hear so often nowadays about there's another retreat or another wellness camp and, lots of that kind of stuff going on. But I noticed that you said to me, yeah, Charlie, we've got these 300 people up north who are on our waiting list and there's nothing else out there. How does your holistic retreat, everything that you're talking about, how does it differ to all this other stuff that's out there? And there seems to be a lot of it at the moment, a lot of options for people to go and do a retreat.
I think, we are in the most amazing space and time. Everything that is happening is obviously as it needs to be. And with all new things, you have emerging grass shoots everywhere. Yeah, so you've got everybody wanting to be involved. Those that want to are really exciting. They pick up the mantle of whatever really appeals and they start their own little things or they join together and they form units. And all of that is to be encouraged. All of that's to be encouraged. That's how creativity comes about. That's how we know what works and what doesn't work. You have to do that. But my real vision is that all those parties that are really serious about offering a protocoled, trained, structured, but creative support to enabling people to self-help will slowly come together. And they may well be the clinics of the future that I'm talking about. That is my hope and my ambition. And the more people that want to jump into that space but need to have support, like I'm here 30 years on, it's been hard. But the more people that really want to and genuinely want to support and be involved in, have the skill set, the more we should collaborate, come together to make that happen.
And if people are listening to this and either they're like, I think this would be a great thing, there's nothing that much wrong with me, but I'd love to go through the process and the assessment and the preventative nature of it, look at what's going on, or whether someone's just been tried everything, they're struggling with some chronic ailment and they can't find a solution. What does that look like? How do they get in touch? What would that initial assessment sort of look like and generally cost?
So what I'm trying to encourage people to do is to stop that sense of, oh, I couldn't make that step, or I'm really scared to do that, or I'm really not sure, is to jump on a Zoom call with one of our senior clinicians. We have 5 senior clinicians. And what that will do is, you know what it's like. If you see somebody and you look at them and haven't got green things sticking out of them, and they're actually quite nice and they smile, it breaks down a lot of barriers. If you can do that without having traveled 300 miles, that's fantastic. And then in that space, it enables us as clinicians to take their case properly, to find out all the stuff they've done, go through all their back catalogues of health, blood tests and x-rays and all of this and dental work, and looking at them in the round, what emotional support they've done, what they found good, what they haven't found good, to find out the bit where they're stuck. And as soon as we can see that stuckness, it gives us the opportunity to then direct them to the right assessment. Because we have 5 different ways of entering in, you wouldn't know that unless you spoke to somebody. So it really breaks that down. And that entry level is £100 for that 60 minutes. But it is £100 well spent.
That's just conversation, no diagnostic tests or anything.
No, but you're going through, you're breaking down the barrier for them to then say, actually, I don't want to do that. It's not what I want to do. And they always have questions like, what does the word naturopathy mean? What is holistic? And if you're doing that in the first time you meet somebody, you're using a lot of time. Whereas if you've got through that and then you've realized actually they do have to do the full assessment, you've got so much more time to really go into detail. It's fantastic. So I would always encourage people to do that. But obviously some people, because they come by referee, they'll go, oh, yes, no, I know Lisa because of this, and I don't need that. I'm just going to go and do the assessment. They can come and do that. But if they were, struggling with emotional blocks, I would encourage them on that, when we have that hour chat, I'd encourage them to start with the optimal sound therapy. Start with that for a few weeks. See how you feel about it. It may be enough. It may be that you don't need to see what your cholesterol or your cell voltage is like. It may mean that that's enough. You do that and you're well. So it helps people financially. It helps them to relax more in the situation and learn about whether they want to do that and engage. And it means that we get there's a better outcome at the end of that.
Lisa, thank you. Thank you. Thanks a million. You're a true visionary and pioneer, like you said, 30 years of championing and trying to find answers is really what that stands for. And, I think the world over the last decade now has been waking up to it, and you're obviously flying the flag and paving the way. And I think it's, such a great solution or source to come to for people who are looking for that kind of thing and looking for answers. It certainly helped me out. And it's fascinating talking to you and, reminding all of ourselves of that holistic back to nature, but then adding on that technology around things. I mean, it's the first time I even made that connection, the sounds from the meditation and taking that on to the next level. I mean, incredible. Love this conversation. And thank you so much for coming in. And we wish you all the best in the future and hopefully get you on again sometime.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you, Charlie.